Hello and welcome to this Microsoft Powerup session for Business Central users. Amanda here from marketing, and I'm joined by Karen Blake, who's going to run us through a quick, easy and low-cost digitalization of business processes through the use of Powerups. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Amanda. So what we're going to go through today on our agenda is an overview and an introduction to Powerups. Some of you may have heard the term Powerups. We're going to clarify what that actually means. Powerups are all part of the Microsoft Power Platform, so we need to have a bit of a look at that as well. And then we'll get into the Powerup functionality itself. We'll have a look at some Powerups for Business Central and how they could streamline some of your manual processes, and then have a look at Powerups for other uses, not necessarily linked to Business Central. We'll also have a look along the way at the standard Business Central mobile app, just so you can see the difference between what a Powerup may look like and what you can use as standard with Business Central. And of course, as always, at the end, we'll give you a chance to ask any questions, and hopefully we can answer those for you today. So having a look at the Microsoft Power Platform, it's giving you the ability to streamline and automate almost any process within your organization that may involve paper, approvals, online registrations, all of those sorts of things where you may be filling in a paper form and storing that data in something like a spreadsheet. Today, we're going to focus on Powerups and Power Automate. However, Power BI, links through to Office, Azure, and other data connectors make the platform itself really powerful, even outside of those two areas that we're focusing on. So what are Powerups? So Powerups is really a rapid application development environment. There are a number of different types of Powerups. Today we're focusing on Canvas Powerups, but there are also model and portal Powerups as well. So it's a suite of templates. With Canvas apps, we can start with templates or we can start from scratch. We can link through to the common data service. Now that has become more important with Business Central with the latest release, because Business Central has now been opened up to the common data service and can utilize that as a data source for its Canvas and model-driven apps. There are also connectors to other services, such as Microsoft Office, which is all in the Microsoft platform, but there's also connectors to things like Twitter. So it really depends on what it is that you're trying to view or what sort of information you're trying to update as to what you would use from those templates. So you can connect to your existing business data, but you can also store data that you're entering as part of the Powerup application. You can store this on-premise, you can store it in the cloud, which is the example that I've got for you today. It could be on SharePoint, in Excel, Office, in Dynamics 365, which is Business Central, and so on. There are many different ways that you can store that data, and it all depends on what the application is actually doing. Some of the benefits of Power Apps, it really comes down to the speed and the low cost of development. Because there are templates and a tool set that are provided with drag and drop components, it allows for non-developers who have a little bit of nous when it comes to maybe if then else statements in Excel, or they've previously been in report writing. They should be able to get in and use a template and build a Power App. You can also build apps without compromise. So we can link through to some of the AI services that Microsoft have on offer through the Azure platform. You can also use some of these to automate some processes. So there are workflows. There are also approvals that exist as standard. It's natively integrated with Office 365 and Dynamics 365 and the CDS, which makes it the perfect tool for developing applications to integrate with your Dynamics solution. If we have a look at the different types of Power Apps, the Canvas Power Apps, which we're focusing on today, are design orientated. So they're more of a drag and drop, like a canvas. So you're creating from scratch on a blank canvas, and it's up to you how that is designed. Little or no code is required, as I mentioned before. There's over 250 pre-built connectors, so I mentioned a few of those being your Twitter, your Office 365, SharePoint. I could mention some other non-Microsoft ones, such as Salesforce. They all exist. Access via Powerups from the App Store or Google Play. So you'll see how we can get into our Power Apps as I take you through the demonstration. We can download the Power app itself and have all of our organization's Power Apps displayed in there. And we can also set them up as individual icons on our devices. Model-driven Power Apps are a little bit more comprehensive. A model-driven Power App is effectively a solution. So for those of you who are using Dynamics 365 Sales, that is an example of a pre-built model-driven app. So it's using the CDS. They can be really simple or complex, but you are a little bit more restricted on the data sources that you can use for a model-driven app. And that would be really where you're trying to build some sort of application functionality into your solution. You can still access a model-driven app via your phone or tablet and from the App Store. A portal Power App is exactly that. It's a portal. It's for your external facing websites. You can create a Power App that may be a customer portal, for example. So customers can log in and have a look at things like their outstanding balances, or generally grab a copy of an invoice. It integrates with external identity providers such as Microsoft accounts, LinkedIn, Azure AD, B2C, etc. So it can still have that security around it, but it's a good alternative if you want to distribute information externally from your organization. So I've mentioned the Canvas Power App is what we're actually focusing on today, and I've already mentioned that there's 250 pre-built connectors. So here we have just a little screen grab of what it looks like when you're designing a Power App. So you have things like your color palettes, you have where you want to place your buttons, but you can choose to create these Power Apps in a mobile experience. You can create them for a tablet. It really just depends on how you want to do that. And again, access via the store. So without further ado, let's get in and have a look at some of these Power Apps. So what I'm doing now is I'm just jumping into Microsoft Teams. I am sharing my Power Apps from my iPad through Microsoft Teams so I can display them to you today in this webinar. So here, if I have a look at my iPad, I have my Power Apps icon here. I also have Business Central, which I'll go into a little bit later on. So if I click on my Power Apps, I'll get a list of all of the Power Apps that I have been had shared with me or available through my organization. I can also go and look for any more apps that I might want. So you'll see here that I've got a few. I've got an expense report up on the top left-hand side, which I'm going to walk you through in a moment, but I've also marked that as a favorite. So it means it stays on the top of my list. I've also got the option to add these icons to my home screen on my device as well. So if I open up my expenses, you'll see here, it's automatically flipped the screen around for me. So what I've got here is a Power App, just a simple Power App for recording expenses. A lot of the time when we're talking to our customers, we find that paper processes are quite common, and expenses is one where paper is often used. Things might be emailed around, approvals might be given as an email response and not necessarily tracked anywhere. So what I've got here is a little application. It shows me my open expenses, so anything that I might currently be working on. I can have a quick look at anything that's pending, so things that I have submitted for approval that have not yet been approved. So if I have a look at my open ones, I can also do things such as date filters. It's automatically picking up the start date of my earliest expense in open there, so it makes sure that it includes everything, but I can change those. If I go and have a look at all of my expenses, I've got a little sort option here as well. So we can do things such as sorts and filters and even searches on these. So if I go back to open, what I'm going to do is create an expense. So to create a new expense report in my Powerup, I just click on the plus button and I give it a report title. I seem to always be flying to Sydney, so I am going to call this one my Sydney trip. The approvers. So this is actually a lookup window. What it's doing is it's looking up all of the other users via Active Directory. So whomever your manager might be, or whomever it is that's allowed to approve expenses for you can show in this list, or you can search for them. But having it connected means that we can use some of those hierarchies of the platform itself in our approval workflows, and we don't need to set them up separately. So I will choose Adele to approve this one for me. As far as things like cost centers go, we can select those at this time. Again, we could have those default from the business units that you've got set up within Azure as well. I can also do attachments. So you'll see here that I've got a little attachment box and I can attach a file. I can take a photo, I can browse my photo library, or I can browse my attachments themselves. So I'm just going to grab a file there and then I'm going to create my expense. So what that's doing is that's going in and creating my expense header, and then I get a chance to add some line items to it. So I click on my new line item, give it a description, so airfare, for example, and the category would be travel, and the cost, 268. That seems quite reasonable for Sydney, and I'll save that. I'm going to add another line item. You will notice at the bottom here that I had the option to save and add a new line item at the same time as well. So this time I'm just going to pop in a cost for meals, a couple of line items here for my expenses, and I'll save that as well. So once I've got this here, I could either leave that open or I could submit that for approval. So now you'll see that that one is sitting in pending, waiting there to be approved. To approve this, there's a couple of different things that I could do. It's actually using the Microsoft approvals workflows in the background. So it's sent an email to my approver, which I can then use to approve this particular expense. So I'm just going to open up my web browser here and log into my email. I'll just give that a refresh. So what we can do with our emails, when we're opening them up or when we're viewing the flows within there, we also get links through to the documents. So the documents that are being stored, in my case, are being stored on SharePoint. I'll just take you to that to have a look at it quickly. So from a SharePoint perspective, those particular lists that I'm using are shared on here. I have an expenses group where everything is going into. On that expenses group itself, I have my site contents here, and what you will see is my expense lists that are being created. So I've got my expenses and my line items. So this is the repository for the data that is going in. So if I jump back to Outlook, there we go. So what I've got here is one of the approvals that I put through. So this approval will come up here, and what I get is a pending approval email. You'll see here that I do have the link that I can go in and have a look. And what that link's doing is it's actually linking through to that site content that I just showed you. But from here, what I can easily do is I can approve that. I can set a reason. I can also reject it, which will move it back into open. And then I can submit that particular response. So if I come in here and I approve and submit, what that will now do is that pushes that information back into Business Central once things are approved. So here we go. I've now finally got my Sydney trip coming through, and I'm going to approve that one as well. So what I wanted to do now was to jump back into the standard Business Central app to show you what that looks like coming through to Business Central. So I'm using this on my tablet as well. So I'll just jump back into Teams, and here we have the standard Business Central app. So as opposed to a Power App where I've just gone through a simple process and I've added a number of things on drop-down menus and a really simple form for entering expenses, what's happened there is that's now ended up in Business Central. So what I've got here is my ongoing purchases, and I have a link through to my purchase invoice that was created off the back of that. So here is that particular purchase invoice that I had come through for the amounts that I've just put through. So that's now in Business Central. But if I was going to create this directly in Business Central, you can see the form that I'm presented with. Even if I minimize this and I show less and I reduce the number of fields that I'm looking at, it's still a lot more fields than I would be using if I was using a Power App. So think of a Power App as a really quick and easy way to replace the information you may be receiving on paper to key into Business Central. And an expense report is a good example of that. Other things that you can do within the Business Central app, it is fully functional. You can use the Business Central app to do most of the transactions that you're used to doing within Business Central. You can also create incoming docs from your cameras. You can also go in and search for things and customers and create new documents as well. So the application itself is fully functional. So anything that is more Business Central related, so for example, you might want to go in and do new vendors or something like that, but you don't want everybody selecting all the fields that may be required. You might want them just to give you the name, address, and details. That's the sort of thing that you can use a form for. However, you still can do those things directly within Business Central themselves through the applications. So there is a version for a mobile, there is also a version for a tablet, and they look slightly different in that the tablet allows you to do this, which gives you just that little bit more room. In the mobile view, it is more of the vertical view that we're having a look at there. So the next thing that I wanted to show you was a couple of other Power Apps. So we had a look at an expense one, but there are other things that you can do with Power Apps. So for example, you might want to set up a Power App to record onboarding tasks. Now this is one that's linked through to Office 365. It is linked through to my Active Directory and my other Office suite. So if I have a look at my onboarding tasks, this is something that you could set up for all of your employees when they first start. So once they're registered, set them up with the app, I can get started here. So I've got some stuff that's automatically pre-filled. So it's grabbed that information from my organizational structure. So I've got my profile here. I can come in and remember that I can't use the mouse. I need to use my iPad and select from gallery, or I could just save those changes and save that photo. So I can go through and start setting up my profile, write an about me email, or build my employee profile itself. So in this particular case, about me, what I might do here, my interests are Power Apps, for example, and I can start filling in that information. And then I can save that. And again, it is completely up to you where it is that you store this information. It may be in the CDS, it may be in a SharePoint form, or something like that as well, depending on how you've got your organization set up. So if I save those changes, it's starting to build that profile and my profile completeness. The other thing you can do with these sorts of apps is have a to-do list. So these are all of the things that I need as part of my onboarding. I can come in here and I can say, yep, I've done that. You could even put those forms on here as well and have links through to them. I can also quickly see my team, and again, this is all information that is inherited from the platform. So all of this is already set up as part of your organizational structures. So when you're thinking about Powerups, it's not just necessarily what you can do with Business Central, it's also what you can do with other tasks as well. So if we jump back to the PowerPoint here, we've just had a look at our Powerups demonstration. And in summary, what we've really just seen is digitization of a manual process or manual processes that are quick and easy and therefore they're low cost to develop. I've taken a simple process such as logging in expenses, putting it through an approval and sending it through to Business Central. I've also taken an onboarding task. I've used one of Microsoft's templates there and plugged it into my organization. So they're the sorts of things that we can do. So think about what you could potentially transform in your business through the use of a Powerup. It may be something like a simple inquiry screen linking through to Business Central. It may be something completely unrelated to Business Central. You may want to do something like capture a meeting was one of the examples that I had on there as well. So that concludes our overview of Powerups for Business Central today.